It's Monday, January 12th, 2026. President Trump calling shots in this hemisphere, preparing shots in another. The riot that wasn't in Portland, Oregon, and did the United States deploy a novel space-age weapon? Next on the AM Update. Late last week, President Trump called a meeting of oil executives at the White House. Included in that meeting were executives from Chevron, Exxon, Conoco, Continental, Halliburton, and a bevy of other companies to discuss investment in Venezuela. During the course of that meeting, President Trump made these remarks.
The plan is for them to spend, meaning our giant oil companies will be spending at least $100 billion of their money, not the government's money. They don't need government money. But they need government protection and need government security that when they spend all this money, it's going to be there so they get their money back and make a very nice return. The plan is for them to spend at least $100 billion to rebuild the capacity and the infrastructure.
$100 billion, according to President Trump, being invested by oil and gas companies to rebuild Venezuelan capacity. At that same meeting, Secretary of State Marco Rubio reiterated the case why actions in Venezuela really are America first.
Thank you, Mr. President. And I think this is a reminder that everything this president does, everything President Trump does is with the American people in mind. It was not in the national interest or national security of the United States and of our people to have in our own hemisphere a country, not just with vast energy reserves, but controlled by an indicted narco trafficker who flooded our country with illegal immigration, including drug gang members, openly cooperated with drug gangs, and by the way, stole the wealth of that country to fund a repressive regime and also benefit adversaries such as Iran.
So there is Marco Rubio once again making the case why hitting Venezuela and really controlling them as a vassal state is in the United States' best interest. From Venezuela to Greenland, now to Mexico. Here's President Trump on Fox News.
We've knocked out 97% of the drugs coming in by water, and we are going to start now hitting land with regard to the cartels. The cartels are running Mexico. It's very, very sad to watch and see what's happened to that country, but the cartels are running, and they're killing 250, 300,000 people in our country every single year. The drugs, it's horrible. It's devastated families. You know, you lose a child or a parent. I mean, parents are dying, too, with drugs. So we've done a really good job. We're knocking it down. The numbers are really getting to be, they're always going to be too high if you have one person. But
so it's pretty obvious now what the plan is, at least for our own hemisphere, basically making sure every country in this hemisphere, particularly Latin America, comes to heel at the behest of the United States. We now go to the other hemisphere, where we talked about on Friday, the lights, the internet were cut in Iran amidst, again, ongoing, widespread, and really historic protests, we think, in Iran. Tehran, a number of other major cities in that country, really controlled and rocked by protests. Some would call them riots over the course of the last several days. After the lights were knocked out, the internet was knocked out. One morning, however, Ayatollah Khamenei came out to make these remarks. He said, "Everyone should know the Islamic Republic has come to power through the blood of hundreds of thousands of noble human beings. The Islamic Republic will not back down in the face of those who are destroyers." He made those comments in front of Iran's governing assembly. He blamed not the youth. He said the youth will save the country. He also made some other indications what he thinks of those rioters. Somewhere along the lines of around 2,000 people, according to some sources, have been killed over a 48-hour stretch by the Iranian regime and the IRGC. Incredible things. Meanwhile, back in Washington, President Trump has been weighing a range of options for action against Iran. Trump has said publicly he may take action if Iranian leaders killed protesters challenging Iran's theocracy, as demonstrations have now entered their second week despite increasingly aggressive crackdowns. The president has been presented with preliminary plans ranging from possible strikes to other options that would not entail military action. At least 538 people to 2,000 people have been killed since demonstrations began 2 weeks ago. Just incredible things. President Trump posting this on Truth Social. Iran is looking at freedom, perhaps like never before. The USA stands ready to help. President Donald J. Trump. Back stateside, we go back to Minneapolis, where the ongoing controversy over the killing of Renee Good, there was footage that came out on Friday, footage from the officer she nearly ran over from the officer's cell phone. And clear as day, Renee Good is seen on that camera smiling at the officers, provoking the officers, generally just being a piece of poop. Nevertheless, the left has come out in force around the country, most notably Minneapolis, Los Angeles, and other locales to protest this martyr to the cause of making sure traffickers and the worst of the worst illegal aliens are protected from government deportation, including this individual who showed up at a protest in Minnesota.
With no cause and murdering people for trying to flee and for obeying a command to leave the area, and then shooting her in the face like that after she drops her kid off at school. We have to show up with guns.
There is a lefty protester in Minnesota, saying that in the wake of Renee Good's obstruction of Immigration and Customs Enforcement and trying to run over and harm or kill an Immigration and Customs Enforcement agent, he says the response to that from the left should be to show up at these protests with guns. Well, we go to a riot that almost happened in Portland, Oregon. Breathless coverage on Thursday evening, Friday morning, about how I think Customs and Border Patrol were involved in a shooting incident that left a couple of people injured. So it was presented as this. This was the narrative that was going on Thursday evening, by the way. Customs and Border Patrol agents just started trying to live fire massacre people. That was basically the narrative that was going around. There were two people involved in this incident. Apparently, they tried to run over a Border Patrol agent in their car. So naturally, again, that is a deadly weapon. A car is a deadly weapon. So Customs and Border Patrol actually defended themselves and injured two individuals. It was painted as if it was a husband and wife. Here's the real story. Here's from Homeland Security. The two criminal illegal aliens who attacked Border Patrol in Portland are gang members and his prostitute, not an innocent married couple. The driver of the vehicle, Luis David Nico Moncada, is a criminal illegal alien from Venezuela and suspected Trinidad gang member. He illegally entered the U.S. in 2022 and was released into the country by the Biden administration. Since then, he was arrested for DUI, unauthorized use of a vehicle, and has a final order of removal. So maybe you saw that story kind of wrapping up on Thursday evening. The reason why it didn't make it into the weekend was because of that. It wasn't a husband and wife just minding their own business. It was a couple of gang members. It was a gang member and his prostitute that were shot out by Customs and Border Patrol because the gang member tried to run them over, much like Renee Good did in Portland, Oregon. Now, the Portland police chief, that would be Bob Day, Portland, Oregon police chief Bob Day, had to call a press conference, to clarify just what had happened. Listen to this.
I hesitated to even share this information initially because I'm very aware of the historic injustice of victim blaming, oftentimes portrayed by law enforcement, including this very agency that I've represented so proudly for so many years. And historically, we have not been quick to disclose the potential criminal history of others. But I felt it was imperative because I was asked yesterday in the news conference what information we have. This is information we have. This in no way draws a through line to the actions or the behaviors that occurred yesterday. I want to speak for just a moment specifically to my Latino community. It saddens me that we even have to qualify these remarks, because I understand, or at least have attempted to understand through your voices, your concern, your fear, your anger. This information in
Bob
no way
Day is that man's name. He's the chief of police, the chief law enforcement officer of the city of Portland, Oregon, through tears, talking to the Latino community. He's in tears because he had to clarify and call off the riots because the person that Customs and Border Patrol shot at for trying to, kill them was a gang member and an illegal from Venezuela. That's why the chief of police of Portland, Oregon is crying. Back to Minneapolis, where more protests went down. Credit to Laura Ingraham from Fox News for actually hitting the mean streets of Minneapolis, where this moment went down.
Shame! Shame!
Do you have a job?
Do
you have a job?
Shame! Shame! I'm getting paid right now! Shame!
Here's a protester. Laura Ingraham asks, do you have a job? I'm getting paid right now. I'm a paid protester. Incredible stuff. Coming up next, we will go to a few interesting news stories of note from around the country, including the alleged J5th or J6th pipe bomber. I told you that was an interesting story. There's a development that we need to get to. Also, a notable shift in tone from Democrats on one crucial issue. And we hear from Pope Leo. That's coming up next. According to Axios, Marjorie Taylor Greene might have put the president's life in danger. Here's the story. The relationship between President Trump and former Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene, it grew so poisonous that the White House told Secret Service that Greene may have tipped off Code Pink protesters. That's a communist-affiliated paid protester organization. Code Pink protesters. Again, the White House says Marjorie Taylor Greene might have tipped off Code Pink protesters about President Trump's surprise visit last fall to a D.C. restaurant she recommended. That episode, which involved a chaotic confrontation between so-called anti-war activists and Trump, embarrassed the president and intensified concerns in the White House about his safety a year after he narrowly escaped an assassination attempt. Marjorie Taylor Greene, if that is true, needs to be arrested, quite frankly. Allegedly, Marjorie Taylor Greene repeatedly called staffers at the White House, ensuring that they were taking President Trump to this White House or to this restaurant. And Marjorie Taylor Greene allegedly, according to the story and according to sources within the White House, allegedly tipped off these communist protesters as to where President Trump would be and at what time. That's evil and wicked if it is true. If it is true. Let's go to this story. You'll recall at the time where this story dropped, where they allegedly arrested the alleged January 5th, January 6th pipe bomber. I said, that's an interesting story. That's all I said about it. Just an interesting story. It's been presented that Brian Cole Jr., the man the FBI says is responsible for the pipe bombings or would-be pipe bombings that never actually detonated at the RNC and DNC facilities in Washington, D.C. They say he's on camera making a confession to what he did. Developments in the aftermath of his arrest paint the picture of an autist who likes My Little Pony. Okay. But, again, the FBI seems to indicate that they've got a confession from him on camera. So this happened. The man accused of planting pipe bombs outside the Democratic and Republican Party's headquarters 5 years ago pleaded not guilty in a court appearance on Friday. Brian Cole Jr. was arrested by the FBI at his home in Virginia in early December and faces 2 counts of transporting and attempting to use explosives. He allegedly admitted to planting bombs which failed to detonate in downtown Washington, D.C. on the eve of the January 6th attack on the U.S. Capitol. But he's pleading not guilty. An autistic dude. He fits all the bills. I mean, from every available report, from neighbors, what have you, this individual is autistic. Yet the FBI, without a lawyer present, we think, without an attorney present, questioned him and allegedly got a confession. I have to think if there is no attorney present, that confession video, whatever that is, or recording, is not going to be admissible in court. And now Brian Cole Jr. is pleading not guilty. And he's got some high-powered attorneys, actually, coming to his defense. I don't want to say too much more. I'm just going to watch this unfold. I'll just tell you that this story, maybe more than any other in the last 3-4 months, pisses me off. And I'm not going to say any more than that. Let's go to this. A marked change in tone over the weekend from prominent Democrats on the issue of Hamas. There was some sort of pro-Hamas demonstration in New York City. A bunch of pro-Hamas orcs marched into a Jewish neighborhood and started chanting pro-Hamas slogans. But everybody from Zoran Mamdani to Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, Chuck Schumer, Kirsten Gillibrand, Kathy Hochul, Letitia James. Now, these are all New York politicians, and more. There were probably a dozen of these posts that I saw. All of them in very overt terms, including Zoran Mamdani, by the way. In overt terms, condemning Hamas. Just right like that over the weekend. Now, maybe this little parade by the pro-Hamas orcs in a Jewish neighborhood in New York City, maybe that was just so beyond the pale, so over the top, that's all it was. It forced them to get on the right side of history for once. There could be some other explanations as well. Maybe they have intelligence that Iran is about to fall. Want to make sure they're on the right side of history. Maybe they have intelligence Iran is about to fall, and all of their sleeper cells, like the dead man's switch or the sword of Damocles, maybe all of their sleeper cells in the United States, once Iran falls, will then activate. Or maybe they're activating hang Republicans with Nick Fuentes and Tucker Carlson and now Megyn Kelly and Candace Owens. Maybe that's the operation that's ensuing here. But I thought it was notable, worth including this morning, that all of these Democrats just on a dime start in no uncertain terms denouncing Hamas. Isn't that interesting? Let's go to this. I looked this up. I couldn't believe this was real. I looked it up. It's very much real. The United Arab Emirates has announced it's cutting funds for citizens who want to study in the United Kingdom out of fear Emirati students will be radicalized by Muslim Brotherhood Islamists on British campuses. What does that say? The UAE, it's slashing funds for citizens who want to study abroad in the United Kingdom because they're afraid that the Islamists they had some part in exporting to Europe are going to radicalize their own citizens. At a UK university. Pick and choose one. Incredible. What does that say about the United Kingdom? They are in a deep, deep hole. Let's go to Pope Leo. Finally, a good Pope Leo for once. In a homily late last week, Pope Leo denounced all forms of baby killing and surrogacy.
In light of this profound vision of life as a gift to be cherished, and of the family as its responsible guardian, we categorically reject any practice that denies or exploits the origin of life and its development. Among these is abortion, which cuts short a growing life and refuses to welcome the gift of life. In this regard, the Holy See expresses deep concern about projects aimed at financing cross-border mobility for the purpose of accessing the so-called right to safe abortion. It also considers it deplorable that public resources are allocated to suppress life rather than being invested to support mothers and families. The primary objective must remain the protection of every unborn child and the effective and concrete support of every woman so that she is able to welcome life. Likewise, there's the practice of surrogacy. By transforming gestation into a negotiable service, this violates the dignity both of the child, who is reduced to a product, and of the mother, exploiting her body and the generative process, and distorting the original relational calling of the family.
Breaking news, the Pope is still, at least, somewhat Catholic. There's a little slump buster there for Pope Leo, who has had some, let's call them, interesting moments in recent months when it came to the issue of immigration particularly. Now speaking out very forcefully and in no uncertain terms about baby killing and surrogacy. We go from the protection of life from the Holy See to the degradation and destroying of life in Canada. A young man was euthanized there recently. A young man with diabetes, a vision impairment, and mental illness. 26 years old. The young man's name is Keanu Vafavian. His mother wrote on Facebook, "With a broken heart, I'm sharing that my baby boy, Keanu, passed away on December 30th, 2025 after being euthanized 4 years ago here in Ontario. We were able to stop his euthanasia and get him some help. He was alive because people stepped in when he was vulnerable and not capable of making a final, irreversible decision. Tragically, the Canadian system later allowed something very different to happen in Vancouver, where a doctor named Dr. Ellen Wiebe, a.k.a. Dr. Death Number 2, proved his death based on mental illness. This approval occurred despite euthanasia for mental illness being banned until 2027. Somehow, Dr. Death Number 2 found a loophole in the system, one that now demands to be exposed so that no other parent has to endure this. This is disgusting on every level. And I promise I will fight this tooth and nail for my son and other parents who, too, have children that suffer from mental illness. As a mother, and after watching and reading countless stories from other families, I can say this experience was not only devastating, but deeply disturbing. The actions of Dr. Ellen Wiebe reveal a pattern of coldness and disregard for a vulnerable human life that can no longer allow me to stay silent. Just that scary smile shows her entitlement for taking people's lives. That is the mother of Keanu Vafavian, who was euthanized by Canada's system at the age of 26 for mental illness. Now, I happen to think that mental illness is overly pathologized. There's always spiritual illnesses going on, regardless of what you want to call it, whatever term of art you want to use. This mother is absolutely right. This is evil. And in Canada, some doctor, even though you're not allowed to euthanize for mental illness, some doctor found a loophole and said, yeah, I'll kill you. I'll be your pallbearer. Just wicked stuff. When we come back, however, a slump buster. A little pick-me-up after that incredibly depressing story. What does it sound like to have a leader of men? We'll talk about that, as well as did the United States deploy a space-age weapon in their operation in Venezuela? There's a post that went viral over the weekend. We're going to talk about that as well. That's coming up next. How about this for a little pick-me-up after the last few stories? We go now to the Peach Bowl, where the incredible and really historic season, not just by Indiana standards, but by college football historical standards, the Indiana Hoosiers are on a heater right now. They're on their way to the national championship game. They dispatched their fellow Big Ten foe, Oregon. 56-22 was the final score. No problems whatsoever. A really disappointing outing for Oregon. As elated as Indiana was, it was deflating for Oregon. Head coach Dan Lanning, though, after the game, really illustrated, I thought, what it sounds like to be a leader of men. Listen to this.
Man, you hurt for those guys, because the world's going to judge everybody in that room based on the result tonight, right? I'm going to judge those guys on the kind of fathers they become someday, the kind of husbands they become someday. But in this moment, you feel like a failure, right, for them, and they're not. They're not failures. These guys won a lot of damn ball games. They had a lot of success. They've changed some people's lives. But right now, in that moment, it's going to hurt. And the hard part, you got guys like Bryce that, that they don't get to be a Duck anymore. They'll be a Duck forever, but he doesn't get to go wear that uniform and go play a game for us again. And I really wanted that for them. Really wanted them to be able to enjoy that and experience that. And they don't get to, right? And I didn't do a good enough job getting them there. And they set the stage where there might be an opportunity down the road where somebody, in this program is able to create something like that again, but, he won't get to share that. But he will be a part of it if we're able to accomplish that moving forward.
Quote, this world is going to judge everybody in that locker room based on the result tonight. I'm going to judge these guys on the kind of fathers and husbands they become someday. There's an Oregon Ducks fan, if he were alive right now, who would absolutely be applauding those words from Oregon head coach Dan Lanning, who I know sometimes he gets kind of cocky. Sometimes he gets caught up in the moment. But I do think he's a really, really good coach. And I think he's a good man as well. As good as you can be for a football coach with tons of resources at Oregon. I from what I've seen, I really like Dan Lanning. But that's what it sounds like to be a leader of men. No, we're not just in this for the money. We're trying to teach some real lessons, the real important stuff in life, like being a husband and father. It's good stuff from Dan Lanning. And now here's this. This is a post that went viral over the weekend. I ignored it at first, but then I saw White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt shared it. And it goes something like this. It's from an account called Mike Netter, who posted, quote, "This account from a Venezuelan security guard loyal to Nicolas Maduro is absolutely chilling, and it explains a lot about why the tone across Latin America suddenly changed." Here's what this Mike Netter says. It is an account from a security guard loyal to Maduro. Quote, "On the day of the operation, we didn't hear anything coming. We were on guard, but suddenly all our radar systems shut down without any explanation. The next thing we saw were drones, a lot of drones flying over our positions. We didn't know how to react." So what happened next? How was the main attack? The security guard says, "After those drones appeared, some helicopters arrived, but they were very few. I think barely 8 helicopters. From those helicopters, soldiers came down, but a very small number, maybe 20 men. But these men were technologically very advanced. They didn't look anything like we fought against before." So when did the battle begin? The security guard says, yes, the battle began, but it was a massacre. We were hundreds, but we had no chance. They were shooting with such precision and speed, it seemed like each soldier was firing 300 rounds per minute. We couldn't do anything. The interviewer asks, "And your own weapons, didn't they help?" The security guard says, "No help at all, because it wasn't just the weapons. At one point, they launched something, I don't know how to describe it. It was like a very intense sound wave. Suddenly, I felt like my head was exploding from the inside. We all started bleeding from the nose. Some were vomiting blood. We fell to the ground, unable to move." Again, this is allegedly an account from a security guard who was involved with or had an eyewitness view of the American operation to seize Nicolas Maduro. The interviewer asks about the comrades. Did they manage to resist? The security guard says, "No, not at all. Those 20 men, without a single casualty, killed hundreds of us. We had no way to compete with their technology, with their weapons. I swear, I've never seen anything like it. We couldn't even stand up after that sonic weapon or whatever it was." Interviewer asks, "So do you think the rest of the region should think twice before confronting the Americans?" Security guard says, "Without a doubt. I'm sending a warning to anyone who thinks they can fight the United States. They have no idea what they're capable of. After what I saw, I never want to be on the other side of that again. They are not to be messed with." Interviewer asks, "And now that Trump has said Mexico is on the list, do you think the situation will change in Latin America?" The security guard says, "Definitely. Everyone is already talking about this. No one wants to go through what we went through. Now everyone thinks twice. What happened here is going to change a lot of things, not just in Venezuela, but throughout the region." Again, that is an allegedly translated account from a security guard who had a front row seat to the American operation to seize Nicolas Maduro from his compound and his military base in Venezuela. And that comes from the account Mike Netter on X. And finally, air analysis, slightly acidic, mostly necessary. Now's the part where I tell you with my big brain, no, don't fall for the propaganda. That's CIA propaganda right there. That's me and my big brain. Oh, you morons, even Caroline Leavitt fell for that. Oh, don't, this is all propaganda. This is all CIA stuff. Do I think that account that we just listened to, do I think that it's exaggeration? Probably. Do I think it is all a lie? No. Let's unpack this just a little bit. Now, when it comes to the electronic warfare to begin with, the radar's going down. We already know we have the capabilities to do that. We saw that in the attack on Iran, Operation Midnight Hammer. So that's plausible, probable that it happened. The drones, the fleet of drones that flew in, either for psychological disorientation, for other e-warfare, and maybe for some targeted strikes and or reconnaissance. Plausible, probable, I would say. The helicopters, we have those on video, maybe 8 helicopters or so. So I'm saying definite, that definitely happened. So now we're pretty much 3 for 3 with either that definitely happened or probable, plausible. Now the fourth claim. some sort of sonic space-age weapon that caused Maduro's soldiers to pass out, to vomit blood, to bleed through the nose. That's something we don't know about. However, I wouldn't just dismiss this out of hand. From what I understand, Nicolas Maduro lived on a flipping military base. Americans had to fly through the country. Our forces had to fly through the country. All of their radars were down. There would have had to have been hundreds of security force members, like this post says, that were either on the compound or within the line of sight of the American operators. And yes, our guys are highly trained, and yes, our electronic warfare is very good, and I think it's better than I thought it was. But even so, hundreds of people, I have to think there were hundreds of guards, hundreds of military members in and around where the United States operators were flying and doing their work. How do you explain the fact that we didn't lose any equipment? There were few casualties, minor casualties, no deaths. We lost no equipment, we lost no men. We got in, we got out in 88 minutes, and we slaughtered them. Maybe some sort of sonic weapon, maybe that's an exaggeration, but I think this account is exaggerating in the right direction, actually. I do think that there's maybe some tools that were used. That's how and yes, this is not to take away anything from the bravery and badassery of our operators, our Delta Force guys. I'm just saying, when I talk about this being a terrifying projection of strength, of force, I'm talking about terrifying. So maybe that account that went viral over the weekend, maybe it's exaggerating a little bit, or maybe even a lot of it, but I definitely think it's exaggerating in the right direction. How do you explain the fact that we lost nothing and no one, and did this to a T in 88 minutes? There's something else going on here. Now, I saw this from over the weekend as well. We'll end here. Let's pretend that there was some sort of sonic weapon that was used, that incapacitated dozens, if not hundreds, of men, but did nothing to our guys. If that is true, and this entire operation happened, it did happen. It happened, regardless of whether or not there was a sonic weapon or not. It happened. That alone is a gigantic, you better not look at us the wrong way, watching world, because we'll do this to you. We'll do this to you. We talked about that last week. I like it when we're doing it for good, when we're doing it for America's interests. And I think the president and his team have acquitted the "how is this America first" argument very adeptly. This is and was American first. And maybe a byproduct of that is that the people of Venezuela are going to have more economic security, more economic freedom, and maybe more freedom in general as a byproduct of putting our own interests first. Wouldn't that be something? That's good. But if there is a guy who occupies the White House who is not good, if there is an administration, a party that controls our government that is not good, then we might be having a different conversation. President Trump was asked by the New York Times late last week in an audio interview, what are your checks on your power on the world stage? How do you answer that question, Mr. President?
Do you see any checks on your power on the world stage? Is there anything that could stop you if you wanted to?
Yeah, there's one thing, my own morality, my own mind.
When was the last time you heard President Trump talk about morality? So he just tipped a hand there. On some level, he does consider morality when he's making these decisions. He just tipped it to the New York Times. He said, yes, there is something that constrains me, and it is morality. Now, whose morals at which times, I don't know. But there's something there. So I like it when our guys are factoring in morality, when we're making these decisions about projecting strength and power and using our incredible military. And look at the results, maybe, that we're seeing. America's interests protected first. And maybe a byproduct of protecting our own interests is that freedom and economic prosperity, just as a byproduct, might be coming to millions of people in a different country. But if we get somebody into the White House, if we get a party in control of the government who is amoral or immoral, we will be having a very different conversation. That's going to do it for Monday. Thanks for listening. Mega episode today. There's a lot of stuff I really wanted to talk about coming out of this weekend. Hope you have a good one. Back at it again tomorrow. I'm Aaron McIntyre, and this is the AM Update.